What do I think of? I feel like Lord Dom second is honestly so overrated, man. Like people really are hyping that shit up. So this discussion was posted two months ago. This guy crunched the numbers on Lord Doms versus IE as a third item, and I think a lot of people were really surprised when it was found that like IE mostly over like performs better than you'd expect. Sky Police 6 the prime. So the TLDR, Lord Dominix is a very strong scaling item, but it can be underwhelming at earlier stages with low AD total. Now, like, why is that, right? Like, AD is the fundamental part of AD carry for the most part. It's how you deal damage. When you get 50 AD, let me just use a random number as an example, 50 AD, and you're at 100 AD total, that's a 50% increase in your damage, essentially, right? Like, it's a 50% increase in your auto attack damage, and depending on how good your abilities scale, like if they have really insane AD ratios or if they have really weak ones, maybe it's a little bit less, maybe it's a little bit more. But the point is, if you move that number up, if you're at 200 AD and then you get 50 more, as a percentage, you've gotten less damage than that first increment of 50. You've gotten 25% more AD. So like the overall strength that you have like increased your character, like increase your auto attack damage for is much less. It's literally half as much of a percentage increase. Like obviously the game doesn't work in that same way, because you can make so many arguments of like, oh well, that's not worth it because it wasn't good to like stack. The point that I'm trying to make is AD early game is actually so important. That's why like I would just point out that like Collector is not as bad as like everyone was circle jerking. For a while Collector was overrated. Then Collector became this thing where everyone hates it and says only noobs build Collector. You're shit at the game if you don't understand the math behind Collector. And it's like, well, maybe like you don't understand the math behind Collector because the extra AD is actually increasing the damage of Kraken Slayer. It's increasing the damage of all your abilities. It's increasing your auto damage. And like, you're not going all in on lethality AD carry. Like you're really building it because it's a AD plus crit item that's relatively cheap. I think like, you know, it's all situational. And that first point is probably the best way that I could like describe everyone's like rabid fucking thing about Lord Doms. Let's look at Lord Dom's like damage, right? Like so you pay 400 more gold for Infinity Edge. The amount of AD that you get is essentially 40 more AD. 40 more AD can be a huge increase in your damage. Like taking away like you know the crit is the same. Really you're thinking about the armor pen and the Giant Slayer thing versus the crit damage and the AD. So it's like 40 AD and more damage on your crits versus 30% pen and this Giant Slayer thing. Now, like, obviously there's like a 400 gold difference, but I guess the point still stands like, you know, 400 gold, or sorry, not 400 gold, 40 AD is like pretty big difference. Basically, the conclusion of all this, I'm going to spare you all of this like ridiculous math that I like looked through. IE is better for backline champions that don't have a lot of HP and armor. Pretty obvious. Lord Doms performs really well when they have a shit ton of HP and a shit ton of armor. But IE still remains really competitive for the frontline damage. It's really close. IE outperforms Lord Doms versus Gore Drinker, Triforce, Sunder, Tabbies, and Death Stance. Do you know, like, that is, or sorry, this is Slash, right? Like, Tabby's Death Stance, that's a lot of fucking armor. And IE still outperforms Lord Doms in that situation. Like, it's really overrated. So I'm end my rant about Lord Doms. I think it's a great item. I build it all the time. I literally try to build Lord Doms like every fucking game. But I think like people really circle jerk how strong it actually is. And they're like, they bought so much armor, man. Why are you not rushing Lord Dom second? It's like, it's shit. That's why I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it because I've done it before. I've tried it and it feels like shit. I think another thing to think about, like within all this stuff, is like which one feels better to build. You don't go from 0 to 3,000 gold. You go from 0 to 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000 gold, right? Like you're buying in increments. Which one feels better to buy? Fucking shitty ass Last Whisper and a crit cloak, or BF Sword Pickaxe? Like BF Sword Pickaxe could potentially win you the fight as you're building up to that item. Meanwhile, you could like let people die. You could like let people live. You could like lose a fight, lose a 1v1, miss a lot of farm, whatever it is, because you built this shitty ass like Last Whisper item before you had any AD value at all. You're so weak. Yeah, I just like, I think like a lot of AD carry mains and a lot of people who build these items are gonna know what I'm talking about. It's really frustrating when people are like, they don't know what they're talking about. They just think like, oh my god, they built a lot of armor. That means that you should have built Lord Doms like really fast. It doesn't work that way. IE third item, actually, after this post, unironically, IE third item became like a lot more common. I think a lot of people looked at this thread without like commenting or upvoting or whatever, and they like realized that what this guy is saying and the math that he did about like, yeah, the math that this guy did, it all checks out. This is a spreadsheet. I'll spare you the details. It's like fucking boring. Someone pay that dude. I mean, I'm sure that he got frustrated too, and he just said, "Fuck it, man. I'm gonna go do some math." You want to link the post? Yeah, yeah. One sec. Let me link it. Here, you guys can look at it if you want. Check out his Google spreadsheet and see if the math checks out. Does it apply to Jin? I feel like it applies differently to every AD carry. You know, it really does. Like, does it apply to Jin? He has like weird crit scaling on his abilities because his fourth shot always crits, and like it's like weird, right? Like everything is just weird about Jin. I feel like you can only really know by feel. That's really it. You can only know by feeling the damage output between the two, and obviously math will absolutely help. You can mathematically prove that one does more damage in this situation than the other, but like the best way I would say to learn is to trial and error. Trial and error. I didn't miss the queue. No, I'm still in queue. I queued up like 12 minutes ago, I think. Yeah, I kind of agree with what Errant Does Twitch said. Like Jin values AD so much because he has such great AD ratios that I feel like it's a waste to go Lord Doms early. I agree with him. Jin really scales off of flat AD. Like that's his thing. You know, he just stacks so much flat AD and multiplies it by a percentage. It's so crazy the amount of AD you can get on him. He's like the only AD carry in the game that can have like 900 AD. Finish what video? What was I watching before, guys? Kind of forgot. What do you think about Vayne? Vayne's pretty good. I don't really know when to pick her though.